And I'm going to work on researching online counseling. There's a lot of really good articles out there about online counseling, so we'll talk about it next week. Potentially what we will do is we will deal with, there's not only the people here, of course, you guys can counsel each other back and forth face to face, but evidently online counseling is becoming a very important aspect of counseling. Skyping, synchronous. Oh, I'm pronouncing it the way it's spelled. Synchronous and asynchronous counseling is taking place. People are tweeting each other, they're twittering each other, or they're doing, I don't know, anyway, they're communicating back and forth. Texting, that's what they're doing. Texting. Yes, I'm tired. It's already been a hell of a week and I have to work on Friday. Is he worth $1? Really?
Huh? Yeah, buy the
Okay.
I was saying field trip,
He charges you to be his friend?
charges his soda a day to be his friend.
Oh, wow.
A vitamin water a day.
This is so sad. Okay, we're going to talk about expressing understanding, and of course this has to do with when you're counseling an individual, you need to show them that you understand what they're talking about. This is extremely important because otherwise they don't know if they're actually communicating with you. And one of the things that you're trying to do is you're trying to get them to express their emotions. The more you can show them that you understand what emotions they're expressing, the more likely they will have come up with emotional statements or statements about the emotions that they feel. Being empathic involves connecting with clients by attuning to their thoughts and their feelings, or what is shared. One must consider the content of what they're sharing, the feelings, especially the feelings of what they're sharing, and the possible meanings behind what they're saying. A lot of times, individuals will speak in their own code. They can't talk about this because it's too painful to talk about, so they'll talk in code. And this happens all the time. This happens with select individuals. If they're talking about, I don't know, let me see if I can give you an example. The lady that I was counseling, the one that was with the sundress on, was flipping her hair all over the place. One of the things that she would say, she'd talk about daddy this and daddy that. Well, she wasn't really talking about her father, but she really was talking about her father. What she was doing, she was using code. And she would say, my husband wants to be my daddy. She would use the word daddy. If she were talking about her father, she would actually use the word father. But when she was talking about how she interacted with her father, she would call him daddy at that point. Now, she wasn't having sex with her father, certainly, but she was madly in love with her father, and she wanted anybody that she had a relationship with to be like her father. And at that point, she referred to that as daddy. So daddy was a code word. And of course, it took several counseling sessions before we figured this out, before we were able to figure it out, or before I was able to figure it out. The other guys were going off into a really wild direction. But she was using this as a code word to mean what she wanted her spouse to, how she wanted her spouse to react. She didn't want him to react in a sexual manner. She wanted to seduce him. It was just a really strange and bizarre situation. So here she is. She's acting out. She's acting like she's trying to seduce the individual. And of course he's responding to her, but that's not what she wanted. What she wanted was him not to respond to her, and for her to be dominant in the relationship. It was just really very, very strange. But she had a code word, and the code word was daddy. If she was talking about her father, she used the word father. But if she was talking about what she wanted, how she wanted the other guy to act, she used the word daddy. Does all that make sense?
Yeah.
You see what I'm talking about? Okay. Yeah, it was just bizarre. Well, it wasn't that bizarre. It was just a code word. And of course, we had to read the possible meanings. Sexuality is one of the things that a lot of people have a very difficult time even thinking about. People don't want to think about sex. Even though it's all over the place. I mean, it's on television, it's in the magazines, it's in double entendres or in
Music.
in movies. I mean, it's everywhere. The advertisements aren't doing as much. I've got good news for you. Victoria's Secret now has a sports bra. I was so excited when I saw it on television. I think it's called Victoria's Sport. So it came on my television, and all of a sudden the words started jiggling. Wait a minute, why would that happen? Anyway, then the ladies came on, and their bras are lighter and they're more supportive, and I was so excited when I saw it. Victoria's Secret is now, instead of having wings, now they've got, okay, whatever. According to Norcross, the empathic practitioner attends to what is said and is at the periphery of awareness as well as what is said and is the focal awareness. And this is what we need to focus on, all of these three things: the content, the feelings, and the possible meanings behind what's going on. Well, since I started having a conversation about sex, let me go ahead and finish it. One of the problems we have is that a lot of us are sexually repressed. We hide our sexuality. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about anybody else's sexuality. And this can be a problem because, especially if that is the problem that this individual is having. So you've got to get used to not thinking about sex, that's not what I'm talking about. Thinking about other people thinking about sex. Using words that have to do with sex. Okay? I'm really old, so I can talk about this kind of stuff. But the reality is that we all, if we're going to get into this game, we need to recognize that sexuality does exist. There are a lot of individuals that are really good counselors, but as long as they're talking about anxiety and depression and suicide and whatever, that they're fine. But as soon as the conversation about sex comes up, they shut it down. And the reason they shut it down is because they don't feel comfortable with it. And this is a problem that people have. People have problems dealing with sexuality of one kind or another. So we need to be aware and to be sensitive to individuals that are having problems in this realm. I was reading an article last night on the internet. I was trying to figure out why Pollard did what Pollard did. Evidently his girlfriend has come back from the Philippines. She's Filipino, and she has an Australian passport. Okay. But she's come back to the United States. She landed in Los Angeles last night, and maybe we'll figure out what's going on. Why Pollard did what Pollard did in Las Vegas. 58 dead, 527 wounded. Lots of bullets, lots and lots of bullets. Okay, why I was talking about human sexuality, wasn't I? Okay, so we need to deal with all of these, whatever problem the individual has, and if that's the problem they had, if they were sexually abused as a child, if they're being sexually harassed, this is a topic that we need to deal with. We need to deal with these topics. We need to be realistic about this. This is a very important part of being a human, is your sexuality. So we need to be aware that this may potentially happen. Just because it bothers you doesn't mean that you need to shut down your client. And that's what's going to happen. If you don't want to hear the F word, if you don't want to hear that person dropping an F-bomb, then you're not going to let them say it. And if they don't use that word, then potentially they're not going to talk about what happened. because they're going to be angry. And when people are angry, they use words that express that anger. And the F-bomb actually is a very good word to express anger or fear or, well, especially anger. That's one of the reasons why military personnel use the word so frequently. It's because they're pissed. And they're afraid, and when you're afraid and when you're angry that somebody's shooting at you, bullets just go straight. I don't know if you ever noticed that. They just go straight. And if somebody's shooting at you, it really makes you mad because obviously they're targeting you because the bullet's coming really close to you. And that really pisses you off. I don't know if anybody's been shot. I hope you've never been shot at. Anyway, it really makes you upset. And so the first word out of your mouth is a word of anger, and usually that is the word of anger that is used. Very common. Does everybody understand what I'm talking about? We've got to deal with sexuality. We've got to do that. And of course, they're not going to deal with it in the book because of the fear of sexual harassment in class. What if I were 6'4" and a gorgeous person and 25 years old or 28 years old or 32 years old? It would be difficult for me to talk about it because of my own sexuality, but because I'm as old as dirt and short and ugly, I don't have any problem talking about it. But we have to talk about it. In a counseling session, you've got to deal with this stuff, okay? You're going to have to deal with it. So you've got to gird yourself about dealing with this topic. And you're going to have to deal with other topics. You're going to have to deal with pedophilia. You're going to have to deal with sexual abuse. You're going to have to deal with different sexual orientations. You're going to have to deal with all this stuff. You can't stay away from it. You potentially may have an individual that you're dealing with who has a sexual orientation that is that they don't recognize, and that's their problem, and that's what they need to talk about. They need to talk about how they really feel and who they're really attracted to. So these are things that you need to deal with or need to think about and to be able to handle. Yeah. Okay? Sorry about that. So we can talk about feelings, but the reality is there are taboo subjects that we try to stay away from. And in the dominant society, staying away from sexuality, despite the fact that we put it all over the television and all over the internet, is one of those things. This is something you don't talk about in polite society, as odd as that is. But in a counseling session, it ain't polite society. It's just the two of you. I mean, you can talk about just about anything with your best buddy, right? You can sit there and talk about whatever. I know, with your friend, well, that's what this person is paying you to do. This person is paying you to be their friend, to be somebody that they can talk to, just like they can talk to their friend. And maybe they can't talk to their best friend about this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But they can talk to you about it because, well, you're not that close to them, so they don't have to worry about embarrassing you or insulting you or pissing you off, because then they'll just not come back. Empathy is seeing the world as the person that you're dealing with sees it, not as you would see it if you were in their situation, but how they see it themselves. And that's empathy. If I were in this situation, this is what I would do. No, that's not empathy. Empathy is feeling their feelings, dealing with their situation the way that they are dealing with their situation. Feeling the way that the person feels about the situation, understanding the meaning that the person is giving to events, grasping the assumption that influences their particular worldview. And this was the tough part about dealing with the young lady with the sundress on. The difficulty was understanding where she was coming from. They didn't understand. The two individuals that were theoretically helping me were two male individuals. And I had no idea what was going on with these two guys, but they missed it completely. They missed the whole sexual thing completely. And of course, it was fairly obvious to me what was going on. She was trying to distract me from helping her. And eventually, of course, the word daddy came up enough that we figured out exactly what was going on. I figured out what was going on with her. Now, unfortunately, they were my trainers, and they had to give me a grade. And they gave me a relatively low grade because they didn't agree with what I was saying. They wanted to deal with a more superficial problem. Well, this was a really serious problem that this lady had. She was married to this guy, and eventually she divorced him. And the reason she divorced him is because he was too overtly sexual. She wanted him to be less overtly sexual. And eventually she married an older man, not because it was a father figure, but because he wasn't as sexually aggressive as the individual that she married. She married a pilot. Pilots are, well, pilots tend to be fairly, it's the military, okay? There's just buckets of testosterone splashing all over the place. This isn't the guy. You don't want to marry a military person unless, you know, sex has something to do with it. Okay. I can say that. Can I say that? Yeah. The military, there's there's guns, and you're talking about weapons systems, and you're talking about weapons platforms. That's what an airframe is. That's what an airplane is. It's a weapons platform. You know. So this guy's carrying around. He's got two 30 caliber cannons. He's got 50 caliber machine guns on his airplane. He's flying around and shooting up trucks and whatnot. Not real trucks. He's shooting up targets. Lots of testosterone, just gallons of testosterone splashing around. Why in the world would she ever marry somebody like that? By being empathic, you know why she married him? Her father liked it. That's why she married him. Her father thought it was a good idea. By being empathic, a practitioner can learn to connect with the people from different backgrounds and experiences. Oprah. The essence to building a client-practitioner relationship depends on whether the client feels understood. And of course, that was the strength of Oprah and her interviewing, was the fact that Oprah was very expressive. Her face is very expressive. Clients will not share personal thoughts and feelings unless they feel understood. And of course, that's what you need to show them. You need to show them you understand. If a practitioner can establish a sense of empathic understanding with the client, they're more likely to build a therapeutic relationship. And of course, you don't have to be an Oprah in order to be a good practitioner. As a matter of fact, she probably shows a little bit more emotion than she should. One of the reasons that Oprah was so successful was because she seemed to feel the same emotions as the people she was interviewing. But you certainly don't want to cry just because your clients. You don't want to cry at all, because you're trying to show them how to react positively to a situation. So you don't want to cry just because they're there. You can nod your head, you can frown, but don't cry. It's the last thing you want to do. You may be demonstrating the wrong emotion anyway. Expressing empathy means communicating an understanding of another person, what experiences they've had, the behaviors that they've shown, their viewpoint, their meanings, and their feelings. A lot of these have to do with understanding, with thought processes. Feelings, of course, are one thing, but thought processes are something totally different. And it's actually the thought processes that are more important than the feelings. Empathy involves restating in your own words your understanding of what the client is expressing, so you need to restate it. And I've got a bunch of examples, and it just irritates me to no end. All of this stuff. This is how I was trained. I was trained as a Rogerian using Egan's model, and this is Egan's model, strangely enough. I have no idea. I get to Dene College, and what book does Sarah use? She uses a book that teaches you Egan's model. Of course she does. Some of this seems a little, will seem a little strange, but what you're supposed to do is show them that you understand what emotions they're feeling. You're supposed to show empathy, but at the same time, you can't demonstrate that empathy by doing. If they cry, you cry. If they growl, you growl. You know, that's not how you show empathy. You show empathy by telling them that this is the feeling that you think that they are displaying. I've been in counseling sessions where every time I said something like this, they told me no, I was wrong, completely wrong. They could say, I was really angry with her, and I'd say, it sounds to me like you were a little upset with her. And they'd say, no, I wasn't upset. You just said you were angry? I just repeated what you said. Now you said I'm wrong. And every time I repeated what they said. And of course, if I went way off base, of course I was completely incorrect. But they just want to disagree, you know. And that's okay, because sometimes you get into a relationship. Sometimes people are in relationships where the other person won't allow them to speak or show any emotions whatsoever. They disagree with everything that they say. So your counseling session has to do with them telling you you're wrong, because they can't tell their significant other that they're wrong. I had a colleague that used to talk to me all the time, and I said she used to talk to me because I never got to say a word. She had a spouse that wouldn't let her talk, just wouldn't let her talk. She was an English teacher. She wasn't allowed to say anything, and her house, as odd as that may seem. So she'd come into my office and I'd sit in there for the next hour and a half, and it was just, and I said absolutely nothing. I said absolutely nothing. All I did was nod my head. If I tried to say anything, she'd talk over me. So and she needed that. She needed somebody to talk to. She needed somebody to talk at, is what she needed. Okay. And I was that person. Biggest hands I've ever seen. They were huge. It was like she had extra large hands. She'd been wrestling horses all over her life. She was a horse person. And she had huge, huge hands. It was the oddest thing. One time I passed her on the street and she waved at me. It was like her whole hand took up the window. It was one of these things. Like that great big the finger that says number 1, that's how big her hands were. I mean, they were huge. They were beyond man hands, okay? They were just massive. We were out one time and a cow came up to her, and she grabbed it by the horns and flipped it, you know. And this, you know, she weighs like 150 pounds, and she just flips that thing. I mean, she grabbed the horns and twisted its head until it flipped over. But her hands were huge. Scared me to death. That's why I shut up. I didn't want her to slap me. She would have knocked my head off. When a practitioner uses empathic understanding because a client feels understood, they are more likely to be open and trusting, of course, share more of their thoughts and feelings, and help clients who are having trouble expressing themselves. And of course, the more emotions that you can demonstrate to them that you recognize, the more likely, of course, that they will express themselves. And this is a trick. This is a real trick. If they're getting loud, you have to get quiet. That's the way it works. You're trying to normalize things. You're trying to balance things. So the louder they are, the quieter you are. Mm-hmm. Once you are quiet, then their volume will decrease. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things that you have to do. It's one of the tricks that you can use. When a practitioner uses empathic understanding, they are validating the client's experiences. It shows the practitioner accepts and understands the client's experiences and concerns. This is especially important if the client has been told that their point of view is is incorrect due to an abusive relationship. And there are all kinds of abusive relationships. This lady there with the big hands that I was talking about, that wouldn't shut up, she was in an abusive relationship even though she didn't recognize it. The fact that she wasn't allowed to speak at home. She was relatively liberal and her husband was relatively conservative. And that's one of the reasons why she wasn't allowed to talk, was because he didn't want to hear her thoughts. That and the fact that she had been to college, she had a master's degree, and he hadn't been to college at all. So she actually had more information than he did. And he was a little intimidated by her knowledge base. So she wasn't allowed to talk at all. Kind of an interesting relationship. They're still married, much to my surprise, but they're still married, and she works at a newspaper. She's an editor at a newspaper, and she also writes humor columns for the newspaper, and she also edits the news coming in, which is kind of interesting, because this gives her the opportunity to intellectualize her world, whereas when she goes home, her husband won't allow her to do that. Huge reader. She'll read a book a day. I mean, she's just amazing. The amount of information that she has. But it's an abusive relationship because she's not allowed to express any of this in the home. Or to complain about anything going on with her. They were living in a trailer. And the trailer, I don't know, trailers are made out of plywood. And this is Montana, where the wind really blows hard. I mean, it's not like here. When the wind blows 30, 40 miles an hour, you guys think you're in a hurricane. Up there, it blows like 70 miles an hour all the time. It's just crazy. And it's cold wind. So, I mean, if you've got a crack in your window, the wind comes blowing in the crack in the window, even though it's minuscule. It's insane. Anyway, so they're living in this trailer, and it's rotting out from under them. And so the wind is whipping underneath the trailer, and there's cold air coming up from the floor. And so she's, in order to keep the house comfortable, and they've got the heater going all the time, but it's only hot here, not down here where the wind's blowing in. So she put books, paperback books all over the floor. So they walk around, instead of having carpeting, they walk on paperback books. Of course, paperback books are made out of paper, and they're this thick, and so it insulates the floor. Dumbest thing in the world. Why didn't they buy a new trailer? They've got money, that's not the problem. No, he doesn't want one. That's the problem. Yes, he's kind of abusive. Students often feel awkward or uncomfortable trying to express empathic understanding. Most societal norms don't allow people to talk about their feelings, especially guys. Guys don't get to talk about their feelings ever, ever, ever. Nodding and saying is less personal, of course, but this is something that happens. We're talking about awkwardness here. Yeah, up top. No, it ain't gonna happen. Okay. Wow, look at her face. Oh man, where do I find these GIFs? This is so tragic. Depression. Okay. When reflecting content, practitioners restate their understanding of what the client has said. This reflection of the client's reality indicates to the client that the practitioner is trying to understand. Are you saying, so you're asking them, is this what you're saying? Is this what you're trying to tell me? Are you saying, what I hear you saying is, as I understand it, or it sounds like you're saying, it sounds like you're talking about being angry with your father, or whatever. So you can use these as lead-ins to what the individual is feeling. You're going to get it wrong from time to time. Sometimes you're aimed at one thing and they're aimed at something else. This is what happened with the lady in the sundress. we were looking for something relatively superficial, and they kept telling me that's what the direction she's going, but the reality was she was going to something a lot more serious. Why she wanted to tell me this, I am not exactly sure. But a lot of people had tried to counsel her, and nobody had been able to get into this degree of information that she was trying to disclose to me. It may have been, the reason may have been because she didn't feel threatened by me. For one thing, she was taller than I was. For another thing, she knew that she could intimidate me with her sexuality because of the way that I reacted to her displaying herself to me. So she knew that I wasn't threatening to her, not like her husband. When she did that to her husband, of course, he tried to have sex with her. And of course, I was being photographed. And I wasn't going to do that anyway. She was very intimidating. Okay, she was very intimidating, and yes, I was intimidated. Damn it. I'll put that on. Okay, I was intimidated. She's also really very attractive. She's very attractive. And, you know, she did things. She wore clothes. She had a hairdo that was very seductive. I mean, everything about her was very seductive. Do you understand what was going on? She had a father that she was in love with. She wanted people to react like her father reacted to her. She didn't want them to be seduced. She didn't want them to be sexually aggressive. She wanted them to be relatively sexually passive in their relationship. And that was the problem. That was the biggest problem. But the other problem was that, and where all this came from was the fact that she was a daddy's girl, and she didn't really like her mother very much. She didn't have a relationship with her mother. So it was like she was taking on the role of her mother, and her mother was cold and frigid toward her father, and because of that, she took on the role of the seductress. Not that she wanted to seduce her father, but she was using that as a way to balance the world. I don't know. Anyway, she was looking for a man that was not sexually aggressive, because her father was certainly never sexually aggressive with her mother or with her. So that's the way he reacted, and she was looking for somebody that reacted in a similar manner. Marrying a 25-year-old pilot was not a good idea. It didn't work at all. Practitioners must show that they are attuned to the client's emotional experiences, and they can do this by reflecting feelings. Besides what the client is saying, the client's feelings can be discerned from their body language, certainly, their tone of voice, and their facial expressions. And of course, she's got an angry facial expression. And she's growling, and she's displaying her teeth. Anytime we see teeth, either they're smiling or they're angry. Anytime we see anger, anger is one thing, but this is rage. Anytime you see teeth, that means rage. And anytime you see teeth and the emotion is rage, then the next thing that may potentially happen is physical aggression. Males recognize this, females not especially. Women don't see this nearly as much as men do. So if Curtis and I got into an argument and he was about to punch me, one of the things that he would do, he would demonstrate that to me by baring his teeth, like a dog. Oh, yeah, exactly. You would do exactly that. Now he's smiling, of course. But if he were about to punch me in the face, he would bare his teeth as well. And that's to demonstrate to me that he's going to be that physically aggressive with me. And he's trying to keep me away from it because he doesn't want to get into a fight. Males see this all the time. Reflecting feelings may be accompanied by a softer voice or leaning forward to imply deeper connection with what the client is expressing. More firmness if the client is expressing negative emotions like anger, disgust, or dismay. And of course, at that point, you're backing away from them. If they're showing extreme emotions, then you should be backing away from them, because something horrible may happen next. She was displaying emotions. She was displaying some extreme emotions, and she was trying to intimidate me, but she was displaying these emotions, and they weren't recognizing it. They just thought she was trying to sexually intimidate me, and they missed it. Getting the client's feelings wrong is all right. It's okay, it happens all the time. We misidentify things. Sometimes select emotions are culturally demonstrated in different ways. The French, for example. If you've ever watched a conversation between two French people, it's like they're yelling at each other. But they're not. They're not really yelling at each other. They're just trying to talk over each other. It sounds to somebody, an English speaker, like these two individuals are about to punch each other. But the reality, and they're close to each other. They're nose to nose. And they're making hand gesticulations. And it looks like they're about to get into some kind of a slapping fight. But that's not what's happening. And that's just part of their culture. It's the way they do things. They get a lot closer to people than, and people in South America do the same thing. They get much closer to each other than we do in the United States. In the United States, we maintain our distances. We have we want to stay at least a little bit more than an arm's length, so just so that if they want to punch you, they have to take a step forward to do it, so you know exactly what's happening. Did you get that step forward? As long as you share your hunches in a tentative voice, the clients will probably feel comfortable correcting you, and that's really okay. When they correct you, they're going to tell you exactly what they're feeling. So it is a technique that I don't like, but it's one that some people use. They will suggest the wrong emotion, knowing that it's the wrong emotion, and they're not exactly sure how deep this emotion is, what kind of emotion it is. So they're trying to get the other person to say what it is. So when they correct them, potentially they'll give them that information. So they will say, well, it seems like you're feeling a little agitated. And of course they're angry. And no, more than agitated, I'm pissed. Oh, okay. So how angry are you? You know, now all of a sudden we have delved into just what kind of emotions they're actually demonstrating. So getting it wrong is not a bad thing. And like I said, some people get it wrong on purpose so that they can delve into how deep these emotions are. Some feelings are not as acceptable in select cultures as in others. The Chinese don't display emotions nearly as much as we do in the United States. So, and of course, Europeans going to China for the first time, they referred to the Chinese as inscrutable. Why? Because they couldn't read their emotions. An Englishman, you always know exactly what he's thinking because he wears his emotions on his sleeve. Yeah, so all of a sudden, yeah, doesn't it make sense now?
Yeah.
All those old movies that you watch?
Yeah,
Exactly.
I get it now.
So they're inscrutable.
That's why the
They're
French are always like, I love Americans. You can read their faces.
Exactly.
Okay, I get it. I'm just standing there like,
It is kind of exciting, isn't it? Learning something that you've been wondering all your life. Yeah. So they're an inscrutable lot. I think Sheldon said that in Big Bang Theory once upon a time, that the Chinese are an inscrutable lot, and the reason is because we can't read their emotions. Because they don't display emotions like we do in the United States. You always know what we're thinking, but not the Chinese especially. The client, I haven't heard from any of them. If they are busy, they could at least email, and the question is, what are the feelings that they're reflecting? And as the practitioner, you might respond, it sounds like you feel sad about that. So the emotion is sadness that they're demonstrating here. Remember, sadness isn't depression. Sadness is an emotion that's is less than depression. Depression, they wouldn't even be saying anything at all. The client sounding angry and speaking with a tight jaw. I feel like we just aren't getting anywhere. He's talking to the practitioner. I've heard this once, I've heard it 1,000 times. We're not getting anywhere. Well, we just did. We just got someplace. Congratulations. The practitioner might respond, you seem to be feeling impatient with me and our progress. Of course, I wouldn't say that. I would say something like, okay, well, let's, we need to delve more into this. I can understand your impatience, but you've been fighting me this whole time. So why don't you give me some more information? Why don't we get deeper into this? The deeper we can get, the faster the more progress we're going to make. Okay, so they've just opened the door, and now you've run in and you're forcing them to say something. Perfect. Great. Yeah, and they're upset because you're not making any progress, and of course you're using that as an opening to get into what they're feeling. The client on the team, some of the people on this team just aren't carrying their weight. If you've ever been in a group, it's normally that way. I hope you're the one that's carrying the weight, not. Okay, anyway. The practitioner, I'm guessing you are feeling kind of frustrated. Yeah, feeling kind of frustrated. The client family member looking scared. When they start fighting and yelling, I just run up to my room. And the practitioner says, I wonder if you feel kind of scared. Showing them that they understand the emotion that they're actually talking about. I mean, running up to your room doesn't have anything to do with emotion, but they're running up to the room for a reason. So you're trying to get them to talk about their feelings. So they're giving you an action, and you're coming up with an emotion from that action. The client yesterday, out of the blue, I was one of the people they laid off. I'm not sure what I am going to do. And the practitioner says, wow, what shocking news. You look like you are feeling quite worried and upset. So he's talking about an action, and he's talking about the emotion that action creates. In common conversation, many people believe that they are reflecting feelings, but are actually expressing thoughts, opinions, or judgments. This is usually because the individual is saying, I feel that, instead of I feel, followed by the expression of feeling. Okay, so normally when we are in a conversation, we don't talk about feelings. We talk about actions. We're talking about something that happened. And I feel that you aren't paying attention to me. Of course, that's a thought and a judgment. I feel that this assignment is too hard. That's a thought and a judgment. I feel that you children should clean your room. That's a directive, of course. So normally we're not really talking about feelings. Normally we're talking about judgments. You're making a value judgment. Blurry duck. Where do I get these things? I know. I feel that you always misunderstand me. That's a thought and a judgment. I feel that this group is terrific. That's also a thought and a judgment. We're not really talking about feelings here. I feel. Okay. It's not really a feel. I feel that you have lots of strengths. That's a thought and a judgment as well. And of course, all you're doing by saying these things is you're showing them that you really don't understand what their feelings are. In families and groups, practitioners may encourage members to reflect feelings, especially in family situations. The practitioner can ask how they think someone else in the family feels. Often the problem in groups is that situations are engendering feelings that are not being expressed or acknowledged, and that's normally what's happening in families. Dad's pissed off because mom's not paying any attention to him. She's paying attention to the children. But at the same time, she may be using the children as an excuse not to pay any attention to Dad. Okay. And that's really what you need to talk about, not the fact that she's always tired and he's always pissed. That's not what you really need to talk about. You need to talk about why she isn't paying more attention to the father, why she's using the children as an excuse to not have anything to do with her husband. Maybe she's not feeling very much emotion toward him of late. Maybe, but there may be a reason for that. Maybe, well, that's what you need to talk about. Okay. It is possible to reflect both content and feelings in the same sentence. This is a really demonstrative picture because what's happening is this person is just throwing information at the counselor. And the counselor is taking that information and trying to organize it into some kind of a structure. That's the practitioner's job. The one person the client is just throwing information at them, and they're trying to put it all together in an organized manner. Probably this is the way it is. Unfortunately, when I counsel people, this is my client and that's me. So I'm a little backwards there. It is possible to reflect both content and feelings in the same sentence. Using this skill allows the practitioner to include more information in their reflective comment. And of course, that's what Egan's model teaches you. That's what Rogers wanted you to do. He wanted you to show empathy. He wanted you to show genuineness. He wanted you to show positive regard toward your client. And of course, that's how Egan came up with his model. So you're trying to reflect the feelings of your client. Can you believe it? She just left me a note telling me to leave. She hadn't said anything about leaving. Action. And this is the feeling that he gets. It sounds like you were shocked when your wife told you that she wanted you to leave. Really? Yeah, shocked. Just a little bit shocked. I've been shocked just like this. You're not coming home? Ever? Okay. Why? What did I do? Ever since I was laid off, I just mope around. I'm just at a loss. The client's talking about an action, and this is the feelings the practitioner comes up with. So in a way, you're grieving about losing your job. And if you've ever lost a job, then you go into a grief process like somebody died. You just lost, you're not that person that you were before. You've lost that person. That person is gone. You'll never be the person that works at that place again. Getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. So you grieve for the person that you used to be. And grief is, of course, a feeling. And you have to get over this before you can go find another job. You've got to grieve before you can find another job. Okay. Group at a picnic where one person didn't show up and didn't let anybody know, which usually happens. Did anybody go to Sarah and Jerry put together a thing out at the lake?
The new rides?
It rained that day, and it even hailed that day. But so I'm loading up my car, and I didn't go out there. So this is me. I not only did I not show up, but I didn't let anybody know. So Sarah came over afterwards, trying to sell me a tub of potato salad or something. But evidently the wind started blowing and it started raining really hard. I didn't go. Okay, I know I should have called. Practitioner, except at that time I didn't have a cell phone. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I don't know her number anyways. The practitioner, it seems like most of you are feeling hurt and a little angry that Mary Ann didn't show up at the picnic. Of course, you can put Bruce in here, I guess. So everybody was feeling hurt and a little angry that I didn't show up. A little angry? No, pretty damn pissed. At least that's what I heard about later. Okay.
Yeah, you're supposed to be there to stop the weather, Bruce.
Yeah, I know. I was supposed to control the weather. I feel so So, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm looking for a feeling word. Guilty, I guess, that's the way I'm looking. Child client, it is no fun to watch football games since Dad left. An action, we don't get to watch football games with Dad anymore. What emotion is he showing? The practitioner says to him, so before your dad left, the two of you used to watch football games together, and now you feel sad and really miss him whenever the football game is on. Football games are on. So we've got the two emotions, sad and miss. There we go. So that is a practitioner trying to come up with the right feelings. Summarizing involves listening to considerable information provided by the client and communicating understanding of that information. Sometimes clients have so much information to share that practitioners listen for some time before making a reflecting comment. You don't have to make a comment after every sentence. We did that in the last example, of course, because we were trying to show feeling. But sometimes you can just let them go. Remember, the client looks like this. That's the client. They're trying to get all this information out. And this is you trying to organize the information that they're giving you. So listening is very important. This is why I'm such a good counselor, because I don't say anything. Keep my mouth shut. I keep my mouth shut. And this is a funny joke. That's okay. Come up with these funny jokes for you guys and you don't even laugh. Okay. In the dominant culture in the United States, it is considered impolite to interrupt. Males do it to females all the time. I know, there's something wrong with males.
In the United States.
They always think they know the answer. They're trying to fix your problems. And sometimes you just want to talk about your problems. I know, I understand. I feel your pain. But in the United States, it's impolite to interrupt. But after taking in masses of information from the client, it is considered appropriate for the practitioner to interrupt in order to summarize. And of course, you do need to summarize, especially if they start taking off in another direction. You need to summarize what they've been talking about. Because they've been talking about actions. They're not really talking about feelings. And you want to get into as many feelings as possible. So you can't let them go off on another tangent and then come back to what they said before. Because remember, their brain, they're just throwing information out. They've got all this whole glob of information to spew to you, and you're the one that has to organize all that. But you need to start thinking about what has happened to that client. The client needs to start thinking about the feelings that are being engendered by the actions that have occurred to them. So you need to put feeling words to their actions. You need to show them what feelings potentially that they had. You need to talk about it so that they can correct you. Maybe it sounds like they were really upset, but the reality was they were upset and now they're not upset anymore. They've dealt with it. Sometimes just talking about things takes care of the situation. That's all that needs to happen. They just need to rant. And as soon as they rant, in their mind they have taken care of that situation and they're never going to come back to it again. That happened on Monday. That happened to us on Monday. On Monday, we interviewed somebody for the social work position. Unbeknownst to us, the administration had decided not to fill that position. We didn't know, and they didn't tell us. So after we interviewed the lady and gave her a very positive reaction, we were told that we couldn't hire her. But we had been warned that possibly this is what was going to happen. So we weren't happy about it, but we had already dealt with it in our own minds. So talking about it to each other, we dealt with the situation. And nobody got upset because we knew that that was a possibility. And now me telling you guys It makes me feel even less bad about it because there's not a whole hell of a lot that I can do. I have no control over any of this stuff. We need that position filled, but there's nothing we can do. It doesn't exist anymore. So what are we gonna do? The same thing,
Yes.
the same thing we've been doing up to this point. And there's nothing I can do about it, nothing at all. And since I can't do anything, there's no reason to get upset, is there? Can you think of a reason why I should get upset? Even
Waste
though-
of time,
I'm sorry?
waste of time.
It's a waste of time, yeah, it's a waste of time. But we met a really nice person, and hopefully she gets a job here. She wants to live in Arizona. You guys all want to live in Arizona, obviously. You think it's the only place in the world to live. Well, she's from Fort Wayne, Indiana. She's from even farther north than I'm from. It's the ugly, smelliest, nastiest place you could possibly imagine. But it's green, and it's cold in the wintertime, and it rains a lot. Hardly ever rains here. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. You don't
So
see.
she had to travel from up there to down here
Mhm.
For her interview and then.
for her interview, now she's being get.
Oh, no. She was interviewing with somebody else. And she came over to interview with us because she had filled out an application and we had shown an interest in it. So since she was in Farmington already, she decided to drive over the mountain thinking, it's only this far on the map. She didn't understand she's gonna have to wind her way down the mountain in order to get here. She loved it. She had a great time. She was amazed by the sight of Shiprock from the top of the mountain. You know, it's gorgeous. It was a really gorgeous drive. She's all excited about coming here. She'd been here before 13 years ago, and now she got to drive home to Gallup or to Albuquerque to fly out. But she drove, down to Gallup, and that's just that's really gorgeous. You guys don't understand this because you see it all the time. But if you're from Fort Wayne, Indiana, it's all factories and trees and no mountains. You never see rocks. I mean, you see a rock, but you never see mountains. It's one of those kinds of things.
Nice.
Anyway, okay. Yes, okay. So, yeah, it was a bad situation, but just because I'm talking about it makes me feel better about it. You got to get the stuff out. You can't just let it fester. If you let it fester, then potentially it turns into something more serious. So the more you talk about it, the less likely it is to really upset you. And I wish we could hire the lady because she's really cool. Not only that, well, she was a cop, so for like a decade. So we could use her in the criminal justice program, which we don't have now, even though we're supposed to have it. I know. See, we would have killed at least 2 birds, maybe 3, with one stone, with one teacher. But it's not going to happen now, so there's no use to cry over spilled milk. It's already on the ground. Can't lap it up like the dog tries to do. Get a mouthful of dirt. Summarizing. Okay, we're going to summarize what the client said. I'm really trying hard in school, but I can't seem to get the grades that I want. Sounds like all my students. And this is what I say to you, students who are working really hard but not getting the grade that you want. You sound discouraged because even though you are working hard, you are disappointed with your grades. I wouldn't say that. Okay. That seems mean, doesn't it? But you're summarizing what they just said. Client, when I am angry with my friend, I tell her how I feel, and then she does the same thing again. I don't know if you've got a friend like this. It seems like if you tell them something, then they do it specifically just to irritate you. Isn't that the way friends are? Okay. I'm glad you guys have friends just like I do. Maybe. There we go. Come on. Come on. Uh-oh. It didn't happen. I don't have an answer. No. Okay. At the beginning of the session, as I remember our last meeting, this is one of the ways that you you need to summarize at the beginning sometimes. As I remember our last meeting, we focused on how distressed you felt about your wife's roller coaster behavior toward you. When she is friendly, you feel good and get more work done. And when she is distant, you worry and have trouble sleeping and focusing on work. Is that how you remember it? So, of course, you're summarizing at the very beginning. This is what happened last time. This shows that you remember what you talked about last time. At the end of the session to a group, we have discussed both sides of the issue and noted the pros and cons of each direction we could go. I appreciate how difficult this discussion has been for some of you. It appears that some members of the group seem to be troubled when people disagree with each other. And of course, that's what's going on and seems to be going on in the United States right now. We have two very opposing groups in the United States, and they're not talking to each other. They're just screaming at each other. That ain't dialogue, okay? Screaming is not dialogue. It just shows too much emotion. We need to deal with our issues without emotion. If we could do that, maybe we could stop crazy people from shooting up a concert from the 32nd floor. Just dropping rounds on the people. It's like howitzer, or like a mortar, just firing rounds, exploding. He was way up there. I mean, it's like 300 yards. That's a long, long way to be shooting. Bullets don't really travel that well, that far. Obviously they do. They made a lot. But he was dropping them. He was dropping all these rounds in on these people. What are we talking about? Okay, summarizing. Klein. When I am angry with my friend, I tell her how I feel, and then she does the same thing again. And why? This went the wrong direction. Okay, well, let's come up with an answer for that. So how would you summarize what somebody just said? How would you do that? If you guys do it, I don't have to. When I am angry with my friend, I tell her how I feel, and then she does the same thing again. They would summarize it, and of course, these guys would summarize it by saying, sounds to me like you're upset with your friend because she doesn't hear what you're saying.
Maybe unhappy?
I'm sorry?
She's being unhappy, ignored,
Angry. Yes. I keep using the word pissed, and of course, in my vernacular, pissed means angry. Pretty pissed, but not quite as angry is. Okay. However, in England, if you use the word pissed, what does it mean? In England, drunk. It means drunk. Okay, so you have to be careful. They've been watching a lot of PBS where they have a lot of English television shows. Then you say pissed and they think that you're talking about being drunk or something. Okay. Sounds like you're upset with your friend because she's not hearing what you're saying. Yeah, you're angry. Yeah, upset. Upset works. I don't think she's really that angry. Okay, during the session with the group, everyone in the group seems relieved that we have agreed to keep all the information confidential. At the end of the session with the family, Jamie and Mary, you seem to be ready to take charge of some of the family problems. It has been hard to disagree with your children on what should happen next. I can imagine that your children are upset because you think your opinions don't count. That doesn't even make sense. I don't know. Okay. That came right out of the book. We've had this guy before. Reflecting meaning is when a practitioner expresses their understanding of the underlying meaning of what the client is discussing. Reflecting meaning is not as straightforward as understanding content or feeling. So we're talking about meaning now. Before we were just talking about feeling. So they were giving you an action and you were giving them the feeling that came out of that action. Now we're talking about meaning. Remember I was talking about the lady in the sundress. The meaning behind the word daddy was completely different than the meaning behind the word father. Father was what she referred to her sire as the individual that bore her. Father had no feeling behind it. But of course, Daddy did. Daddy was her understanding of her father, of the way her father was. To understand meaning, practitioners need to not only be good observers of the behavior and tone that accompanies the content, but also must listen for the possible meaning a client is giving to a situation, to an action, to a thought, or to a feeling. So what meaning are we dealing with here? What is the impact of what you've just said? When working with clients who come from different backgrounds than your own, it is particularly important to express your tentative understanding of their meaning. Here's a situation where this lady, this is the practitioner, and this guy is her client, and he's Asian, and she's not. So it's possible that she's not going to understand the meaning behind what he says. Remember, the Asians are an inscrutable lot, which means they don't always say what they mean. The Japanese never say no, ever, whether they mean no or not. They use facial expressions to tell you what they're talking about, but they will never tell you no. But their face will say no. Now, of course, American GIs get in trouble with this all the time. Remember all that testosterone I was talking about? Okay, so you got a GI, he's downtown, he's talking to a young lady, and he starts flirting with her, and she seems to be accepting what he's saying. It sounds like, or it seems to him, like she wants to take this relationship farther. Maybe make it physical. Because she's not shooting him down. She's not saying no. She doesn't say no. All she says is maybe and yes and maybe. So he thinks he's progressing in the relationship. And she's trying to tell him, no way, Jose, and maybe that's actually his name. No way, this isn't going to happen in her face, but her words are saying, because she can't be rude. She's Japanese. They don't ever say no. And of course, he's misinterpreting what she's saying. And the next thing that happens is that he feeds her. Maybe he feeds her, takes her out, or spends half of his paycheck buying her food, and he thinks, well, wow, guess what's going to happen next? And what actually does happen next is she tries to leave, and he gets upset. And then he does something he shouldn't have done. Happens over and over and over and over. The Marines have more of a problem with this than anybody else. Navy, not so much. Navy guys are used to going into ports, but the Marines aren't. The Marines, and there's a lot more testosterone splashing around a Marine barracks than there is in a ship. As odd as that sounds. Anyway, so they have problems. So here we are. We're dealing with another culture, and that culture doesn't express feelings the way that we do in the United States. And because of that, you may misinterpret what's going on. It sounds like there's no emotion going on at all. And he's talking to you, and his facial expressions are telling you that there's something really seriously wrong, as far as he's concerned. But you're used to seeing Americans where we make facial expressions, or whatever. But he doesn't have hardly any facial expressions at all. But he thinks he's communicating with him. A student from China who is Chinese or Chinese American must always get excellent grades or be considered a disgrace to their family. This is something that I didn't recognize. This is all over Asia. It's not just China. I had a student from Bangladesh, and he was getting an A- in my class. And he came to me and he was distressed. And I didn't understand what was going on. I thought, A-, geez, I wish I'd gotten A- when I was in college. By golly, I would have been thought of as brilliant. No. It's a disgrace to his family if he doesn't get a straight A. And actually, he graduated cum laude. He had the second highest grade point average in the class. because he always strove to have the highest grade in the class. He wanted to always have the highest grade in the class. So that's what he did. So you need to understand these things. They don't have the same, their feelings, they show their feelings in a different manner. They express their feelings in a different way. And these are something that you need to understand. What about here? I'm not talking about the Navajo. Potentially you've got somebody else coming in, somebody that's a Hopi, somebody that's an Apache. Do they show emotions the same way as the Navajo do? They don't, do they? Do they? How about the Laguna? Those guys are funny.
Funny, I was laughing.
They are so funny. Everything's a joke to them. They're never serious. What's going on with them? So what about other native groups in this area that may potentially come in to talk to you? What do we know about them? Do they show emotions exactly the same? Are their taboos the same as yours? Are they going to try to talk about things that you don't want to talk about because it's taboo in your culture? Is that possible? Is this information that we need?
Yeah, I think it depends on the age of the individual you
Okay.
engage in a conversation with. Like if it were maybe someone of more of an elderly status in another tribe besides Navajo, I don't know if they'll be that open to talk to you.
That's a good point. It's excellent.
But if it's someone that's closer to your age or someone that seems to be in the same peer group as you, I think it'll be a
Right.
little bit more fluid.
What's probably the first thing you need to do when you talk to somebody who's native? It's right off the top of my head.
Handshake.
I'm sorry? Handshake?
Yeah.
You don't want to have a Western handshake. They try to break your hand, don't they?
Well, I think that depends too on the tribes, it's different. Because I
Okay.
know even in Navajo, some people appreciate a stronger handshake and some people don't appreciate the strong handshake. So even amongst Navajos, that
Right.
handshake is translated
Right.
as something else.
Right, right. How about figuring out how traditional this person is? I mean, that's like the first step. Joe's shaking his head. What's going on? Am I wrong?
Oh, no. You did exactly. It's not that with me. When people approach me or when I approach them.
Right.
it's different.
Yeah, and I talk about this all the time, and I'm not exactly sure. I don't know. You know, I wander around the building, and I'm not exactly sure how traditional anybody is. LA, for example, down the radio station, I have no clue. I have no clue. So if I approached her and thinking, I have to figure out how traditional she is, and I don't know. You know, can I tell by the way she dresses? She doesn't have, you know, Grateful Dead t-shirts on. So that tells me something.
She's got logos.
Right. And I don't have a
You always have a bow
I have a bolo tie. But they're not bolo ties from here usually.
tie. No.
Bolo ties from up north.
And then you wear Hawaiian shirts on Thursdays.
Always on Thursday. Thursday is always Hawaiian shirt day. Okay. So, you know, Hawaiians are indigenous as well, but only in Hawaii, of course. And I'm certainly not Hawaiian. But I honeymooned in Hawaii. I really enjoyed it. Had a good time. It's paradise there, nice and warm, every day, not just some days, but every day. It's time to stop. So one of the things that we need to determine is traditional. You need to determine how traditional they are. You also need to find out information about them to understand their different spirituality, potentially. Okay. Because I have no clue. I have friends who are Apache. I had friends up north that were Apache. And I got some select information, but I don't know if different areas, San Carlos, and White Mountain, and whatever. There's a group out at Fort Sill